22nd, The Lost Tapes 2. When I go back to The Lost Tapes 2, it feels like digging through Nas's Def Jam vault without ever finding a clear thread. The original Lost Tapes worked because it felt purposeful and tight. This one feels scattered, pulled from too many sessions with wildly uneven results. Tracks like No Bad Energy, Queensbridge Politics, and Lost Freestyle remind me why Nas's unreleased material can be special. There's maturity there and flashes of real sharpness, but that momentum doesn't last. Songs like Tenasia and Jarrow of Rap quickly drag things down with weak hooks and overworked ideas. Too much of the album sounds unfinished. There are moments die-hard fans will appreciate, but as a full project, it feels more like unrealized potential than a necessary chapter in Nas's catalog. 21st, Nasir. I remember expecting this to hit immediately. Nas rapping over Kanye West production during that 2018 run felt like a guaranteed moment, but once I actually sat with the album, it came across rushed and unfinished. There are glimpses of what it could have been. Cops Shot the Kid has bite, and White Label finds Nas sounding comfortable and confident. The problem is the 7-track format never gives him room to really dig in. Other songs feel underwritten, and tracks like Not for Radio lose focus as ideas start drifting instead of landing. Instead of feeling sharp and concise, Nasir feels cut short. I don't come back to it for what it is, only for what it almost was. 21st, King's Disease. The first thing that stands out to me about King's Disease is how relaxed it sounds. This was the start of Nas's partnership with Hit Boy, and the album leans into reflection more than urgency, with Nas speaking from experience rather than trying to chase relevance. Songs like Blue Benz and 10 Points suit him perfectly, and the firm reunion on Full Circle feels natural, not forced. Where the album loses me is in its inconsistency. The auto-tune heavy tracks stick out in the wrong way and break the calm, measured tone the album sets early on. I see King's Disease as a mature Nas record that mostly works, even if it never fully locks into one sound. It's solid, just uneven. 19th, Nostradamus. I've never found Nostradamus hard to explain. It sounds like an album released in a hurry. Dropping the same year as I Am, it feels pulled in too many directions. Like Nas was reacting instead of leading. When he slows down, it works. Project Windows and Life We Chose tap into the kind of writing that made people take him seriously in the first place. But those moments sit awkwardly next to radio grabs like Big Girl and You Owe Me, which feel forced and out of step with everything else. By the time it ends, the album doesn't leave a clear impression. It feels less like a statement and more like a bundle of ideas that never got shaped into something solid. 18th, the album. I remember how big the album was supposed to feel. A group built around Nas, AZ, and Foxy Brown, with Dr. Dre handling production, sounded like a guaranteed statement before you even heard a second of music. Phone Tap actually delivers on that promise, and it shows what this project could have been. The problem is everything around it. Too many tracks feel smoothed out, dressed up for crossover instead of leaning into the grit that made these artists compelling on their own. There are flashes of chemistry, but they never stack up into something lasting. When it's over, the album feels less like a moment that landed and more like one that slipped through everyone's hands. 17th, King's Disease 2. I came away from this feeling like Nas and Hit Boy finally clicked properly. Everything sounds more settled this time, especially on tracks like Rare, Store Run, and Death Row East, where Nas raps with clarity and purpose instead of testing the waters. Nobody is the obvious high point and easily the song that defines the album. Around it, most of the track list moves smoothly, but a few guest appearances start to pull attention in the wrong direction. Some of those features feel unnecessary and break the album's rhythm just when it's finding its stride. Even with those missteps, this one feels like progress. It doesn't reach as high as it could have, but it clearly moves Nas forward instead of treading water. 16th, Magic 2. Magic 2 feels like Nas stopping by, saying what he needs to say and leaving. The album is short by design, and Nas and Hit Boy don't waste time, pairing clean production with sharp, self-assured verses. Songs like Bokeem Woodbine and Irvin Magic Johnson stand out for their imagery and confidence. Nothing here feels unnecessary, but the flip side of that is how quickly it passes. Just as it starts to settle in, it's already over. I enjoy it while it's on, but it doesn't stick with me the way stronger entries in this run do. 15. Untitled. Untitled never tries to make things easy on the listener. From the jump, Nas comes out swinging, opening with Queens Get the Money and diving straight into race, politics, and media power without cushioning the message. Not everything lands cleanly. Some ideas hit with real force, while others stumble once the music has to carry the weight. But when Nas locks in, the album doesn't just make a point, it leaves a mark. It's rough around the edges and sometimes exhausting, but that's part of what makes Untitled stand out. Few Nas albums take risks this openly, and even fewer sound this uncompromising. 14th, I Am. I've always listened to I Am with a bit of frustration, because you can hear how much bigger it was supposed to be. Originally planned as a double album, the leaks forced Nas to reshape it, and what's left is a project caught between two versions of itself. When it hits, it really hits. NY State of Mind Part 2 carries weight, and Nas is Nas in full command, sounding untouchable. But those highs sit next to tracks that feel like placeholders, pulling the album down every time it starts building momentum. By the end, I Am doesn't feel like a finished statement. It feels like a compromise, part classic, part damage control. 13th, Magic 3. Magic 3 feels like Nas taking a breath. As the closing chapter of his Magic run with Hit Boy, it settles into a calmer, more reflective space instead of trying to make a big statement. Songs like Sitting With My Thoughts and Based on True Events let him sit with his own thoughts, backed by textured, jazzy production that keeps everything understated. There's no rush here, just comfort and control. It doesn't climb as high as some of the earlier releases in this stretch, but that isn't really the point. Magic 3 works because it knows exactly what it is, a quiet, thoughtful ending rather than a finale that needs to shout. 12th, Street's Disciple. Street's Disciple always feels like Nas trying to say everything at once. Spread across 2 discs, it dives into politics, relationships, and legacy, and you can hear how personal this period was for him. There's real weight here, a message to the feds hits with urgency, and Bridging the Gap stands out as one of his most sincere, grounded moments. The issue isn't the ideas, it's the sprawl. With so many tracks, the strongest moments end up competing with material that didn't need to make the final cut. I respect Street's Disciple more than I'll revisit it. It's uneven and demanding, but there's enough depth in it to make the effort worthwhile. 11. Hip Hop is Dead. Hip Hop is Dead always struck me as more curious than combative. The title grabs attention, but the album itself feels like Nas thinking out loud about where the genre was heading, not trying to write it off. The production helps carry that conversation. Kanye West and Dr. Dre give the album some of its strongest moments, and Black Republican stands out as a heavyweight collaboration that actually earns its moment. Not every experiment works, and a few ideas land awkwardly, but the purpose behind them is obvious. I've never heard this album as Nas turning his back on hip-hop. It sounds more like him wrestling with change, trying to understand it instead of pretending it wasn't happening. 10th, Magic. Magic feels stripped down and deliberate, a tightly wound project that trades excess for focus. Over gritty, minimal production from Hit Boy, Nas sounds calm, assured, and fully aware of his legacy. Speechless sets the tone immediately, pairing eerie strings with reflective bars. Tracks like Ugly and Woo for the Children lean into introspection without slowing the album's momentum, while Meet Joe Black and Wave Gods bring sharper energy and confidence. At under 30 minutes, Magic doesn't linger. It arrives, makes its point, and exits cleanly, proving Nas doesn't need long runtimes or grand statements to sound authoritative at this stage of his career. Ninth, the Lost Tapes. The Lost Tapes has always felt different to me. These don't sound like leftovers. They sound like songs that slipped through the cracks but never lost their weight. Do Rags sets the tone with warmth and memory, and tracks like Purple and Fetus show how creative Nas was during this period, even when experimenting with perspective. The production stays stripped back and soulful, giving his writing room to breathe. There are a couple of quieter moments that don't hit as hard, but they're easy to overlook. As a whole, The Lost Tapes feels less like a compilation and more like a hidden chapter in his catalog, one that still holds up surprisingly well. Eighth, King's Disease 3. This is the high point of Nas's run with Hit Boy for me. With no guest features, everything rests on him, and he carries it comfortably. Tracks like Ghetto Reporter, Michael and Quincy, and Legit show him blending technical sharpness with reflection, while Once a Man, Twice a Child stands out as the most inward-looking moment. Don't Shoot closes the album in a way that feels calm and deliberate. There are one or two stylistic choices that don't fully land, but they barely register. More than anything, this album sounds like confidence. Nas making it clear, this late career stretch is no accident. 7. Light Years. Light Years feels like Nas deliberately peeling everything back. Linking up with DJ Premier, he drops the modern shine and leans into dusty drums, simple loops, and the fundamentals that built his sound in the first place. What I like most is how the album nods to hip-hop history without turning into a nostalgia exercise. The references and samples are woven in naturally, and Nas sounds relaxed but still sharp, reflecting on life, craft, and longevity without forcing the point. It doesn't try to prove relevance. It moves like it already knows it has it, reconnecting Nas with the raw core of who he is as an artist. 6th, Stillmatic. Stillmatic always sounds like a response to me. After a run of uneven releases, he comes back here fully aware of the criticism and clearly ready to address it. The intro lays the groundwork, and Ether follows as one of the most talked about diss tracks in hip-hop history. But the album isn't carried by confrontation alone. One mic slowly builds pressure in a way that still holds up, and Rewind flips narrative structure to show he was still thinking creatively. The production moves around stylistically, but it never distracts from what he is doing. Stillmatic isn't flawless, but it works as a reintroduction, reminding listeners why his voice still mattered at that moment. 5th, Distant Relatives. Distant Relatives always feels bigger than a standard collaboration to me. Nas and Damian Marley blend hip-hop and reggae in a way that feels intentional and outward-looking, not like a novelty pairing. As We Enter sets the tone immediately, opening things up with energy before the album moves into heavier territory on tracks like Africa Must Wake Up and Tribal War. Patience is the moment I always come back to, layering rich production with genuine reflection. What makes the album work is its balance. It carries real political weight, but never talks down to the listener. Distant Relatives feels grounded in history while still moving forward, which is why it holds up so well. 4th, God's Son. God's Son always sounds like he's holding two emotions at once. There's grief running through it, but there's also confidence, and from the opening moments of Get Down, that balance feels good as a listener. Dance strips things back and shows real vulnerability, while Made You Look snaps in the opposite direction with raw Queensbridge energy. What stands out to me is how easily he shifts between reflection and defiance without it feeling forced. The production stays in the background, which is exactly where it should be. God's Son feels like he's working through loss without dulling his edge, and that's what makes it one of his most complete records. 3rd, Life is Good. This is where he sounds the most at peace to me. He works through divorce, fatherhood, and success with an honesty that feels lived in, not staged or dramatic. The production gives him room to do that. Salaam Remi and No ID keep things warm and soulful, letting tracks like Daughters and Bye Baby breathe. At the same time, songs like Locomotive and The Dawn bring confidence back into the picture without breaking the mood. What I like most is that it never gets stuck looking backward. Life is good feels like acceptance. He's acknowledging everything that came before while staying firmly grounded in where he is now. Second, it was written. This album has always felt like the penultimate album in this ranking to me. This is where Nas expands his sound without letting go of his roots. The production turns more cinematic, the themes grow broader, and the ambition is clear from the opening moments. The message sets that dramatic tone straight away, while I Gave You Power remains one of his most inventive storytelling tracks, rapping from a perspective few were willing to attempt. Shootouts leans fully into the mafioso aesthetic, and affirmative action is still one of my favorites that I come back to even now. In this list, this album sits right on the edge of the top spot, bridging raw street realism with a bigger, more expansive vision of him. First, Illmatic. Illmatic is the one I never debate. I can reshuffle the rest of his catalog, but this always stays where it is. What keeps pulling me back is how locked in it feels. NY State of Mind still drops you straight into his world without easing you in. The world is yours doesn't need to reach for anything big, it just works. Memory Lane sounds like reflection, before reflection became a formula. There's nothing on this album that feels added to fill space. He sounds young, but completely sure of himself. Not reckless, not polished, just clear. That's rare on a debut, and it's why this record still holds up under real scrutiny. For me, Illmatic sits at the top because nothing else replaces it. Other albums build outward, but this is the core. Take it away, and the rest of the catalog doesn't hit the same. Comment your biggest disagreement. Hit like if this helped, and subscribe for more hip-hop rankings.